brings boaters from all over the Pacific Northwest to Victoria every year. It's the Swiftsure International Yacht Race, hosted by the Royal Victoria Yacht Club. To really understand this competition, it's important to get into the heart and soul of sailors to understand what is the fascination with sailing.
The passion of sailing comes from the freedom of being on the water and being the master of your own destiny, doing the things you want to do, using nature to make you go, not using fossil fuels if we want to talk about fossil fuels, trying to get the most out of maybe nothing. So we'll sail in light winds, just trying to keep going, because there's that satisfaction when you're finished of having done something with nothing. And then when there's too much wind, knowing when to power back, knowing when to put the brakes on, knowing when to slow down. That's the freedom of being in charge of everything.
Here's a funny insight, and you'll hear it from a lot of sailors. They really hate the cold, yet the cold in the Pacific Northwest is pretty much omnipresent. What you're getting out of this is the opportunity to learn a skill that you can never learn at all. You'll always be constantly trying to absorb more and more, whether it's the wind, whether it's the changing technology, whether it's getting better and better knowledgeable about the boat or the people around you and their particular way of racing. There's so much to learn, and man, that's just pretty hot stuff.
It's a very complex game out there. Sailing, racing, I love being on the water. Probably just as comfortable on the water as I am on land, which is fantastic. But the thing about sailing is your environment is changing constantly. It's like three-dimensional chess. If you're just sailing, I mean, you have to be aware of the bottom topography. You've got to be aware of the wind, the sea state. There's always stuff going on.
Just being on the water, you're independent, you're in your boat, you are the one that's managing what direction you want to go. You're trying to figure out between the wind and the waves and the other racers exactly which is the best course to take, because a little piece of me is competitive. For sailing, it's like when you're standing on the deck of the boat and you have the lines for the spinnaker in your hand. You're connecting the boat with the wind, with the water, and you're just making it fly. When you're sailing, you hear the hull just sing and vibrate, and you know you're just right.
Sailing is, it's short bursts of immense physical activity interspersed by long periods, often, of inactivity. And that actually is a big challenge in itself. It's a little bit like chess and sports and, and endurance all kind of mixed together, right? It's a marathon, it's a sprint, and it's a chess game all at the same time.
Swifture's competition is a great motivator for many sailors. It is also a unique race because it is supported by a team of over 200 volunteers. These are dedicated people working in logistics to transponders, tracking, training, monitoring, search and rescue, working at the start and finish line, inspection docks, mark rounding, crowd security, media relations, photography, docking, marine operations and communication, administration and finance, awards, sponsorship, and even keeping the soup warm for those hardy souls who finish the race in the chill of darkness.
Okay, so let me explain to you.
A key volunteer is Gail Bryant, who was responsible for the enormous task of accommodating over 200 boats in the Inner Harbor in 2017. Longer vessels are docked at Ship Point Wharf, which, once the race begins, becomes the inspection dock, where all boats that finish are reviewed to ensure that they have complied with safety regulations and return their transponder equipment.
Here's the docks. They're empty on Wednesday, they're ours. And then when you come down to the Inner Harbor, you're going to see from the photos here just how crowded it gets and how many boats we get in here. On Ship's Point, we have these 3 docks, and we've just stacked them up, and we raft a lot of the boats up to there. So in the inspection dock, we have teams that work throughout the night, all the way till Monday morning at 6 a.m. when the race officially ends. And we give them soup, and we do the safety inspection, and we give all the skippers their map of their trip. So we have these spots that we pick up. Now these transponders are part of the skipper's packages that we give out to every boat. and it signals via satellite where all the boats are throughout the race. Then we also have the grid charts that we pick up, and that's again part of the safety of the event, and they radio in their position so that we can tell that everybody's accounted for throughout the race. Now when they come into Ship's Point, we do the safety inspection. We're going to be inspecting for, but we have the same 5 things, but we never tell them what it is, so they have to be prepared for all the safety features that they're supposed to have on their boat for that race. We have a team of people that go out, because oftentimes we'll have boats, so many boats come in at the same time, we'll have people going onto these boats and we'll have them circling out in the harbor.
For the racers, the finish line couldn't come soon enough, and Dave Trace and his crew are responsible for all the monitoring and spotting.
I've been involved with Swiftsure since the classic race started about 7 or 8 years ago, and I love it.
The finish line is an imaginary line from the breakwater to the Royal Canadian Navy base at Esquimalt. It's almost a mile long. Every boat crew also records when they think they crossed the finish line, and they also record the name of the boat in front of them and behind them.
Okay, ours. Swiftsure Race Committee. Race Committee, this is Riot. We are reporting 2 miles from the finishing line.
2, 1, mark! Got him.
Teams set up measuring equipment and computers and act as spotters.
Sail number 1.
Exact time that boats cross the line.
Riot.
As another confirmation to compare with results officials in case of a dispute. Dave's favorite memory of Swiftsure at the finish line.
I think the finishing of HMCS Oriole a couple of years ago was great. At 8 o'clock Sunday night, every boat had finished with the exception of Oriole. And it was at that time west of Nia Bay doing 3 knots. And that's a long way away. So we tore the finish line down, packed it all up. Oriole's out there coming in very slowly. Will it finish? It's only got till 6 o'clock Monday morning. So I talked to Gary Davis, PR guy, and who was a former commander of the Oriole, and he got on the phones, and I got a call from the captain of the Oriole's wife. Jeff Kibble was on the Oriole, and his son, I think he was 12, was also on with him. And Jeff's wife phoned me and said, "My husband is going to finish this race. It's his last year on the Oriole. And then he's finished with it. He is going to finish." So we arranged that she would be in contact with the Navy and with Jeff to find out, and she would give me a phone call at home when it was an hour or so before he was going to finish. So 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. I jump out of bed, take a VHF radio, a flashlight, a horn, and head down to the Navy area where we finish the boats. I contact Oriole, I see its lights. Oriole continued around to the inner harbor where our chair, Vern Burkhardt, had managed to roust out everybody he could find to give it an excellent and wonderful warming. And so Jeff finally got the Oriole across the finish line. And that all took place down on the docks at 3 a.m. and had a good welcome with his wife there to meet him.
There are many highlights during the Swiftsure International Yacht Race, but imagine going back decades and thinking about how sailing has changed over the years.
Well, I went back to 1930 when the first 6 gentlemen decided to have a race. They were deciding to go at that time to Port Townsend, and the boats that they would be using would have been wood, and their sails would have been either cotton or hemp, linen. If we could resurrect these guys and bring them aboard the naval ship that signals the starts for the various races, I think they would be totally astounded and amazed at what they would see when those 200+ boats would be milling around ready to get started. One of the things that changed was the hull structure and the deck structure. Instead of wood, we now have polyester resin and fiberglass for most of the boats. Instead of just various kinds of boats, we would have multi-hulls, sloops, ketches, every kind you can imagine. They would look at how sleek everything was and to some degree how uniform they were. The sails have changed significantly too. In the past, they used cotton or linen. Nowadays, Dacron is probably the primary material, but it's been reinforced by Kevlar and carbon fibers and so on. So the sails are stronger. They're also very glossy. Sometimes they look gold, silver. as well as white, and they make a beautiful spectacle.
Hemp ropes of the past have given way to new cord lines of carbon fiber, usually reinforced by Kevlar.
The next area that's really changed are navigation devices. In the past, these gentlemen would have had to use dead reckoning and paper charts in order to find out where they were. Well, today we have GPS, of course, and there's AIS, which is the Automated Information System, which allows others to see where you are. And that's a very good thing. It's both good for collision and so you don't run into anybody else. And there's radar, of course. I think that the 1930s gentlemen, if they could transport themselves to the naval ship, they would just be dying to get back onto one of those boats.
One constant during the Swiftsure International Yacht Race is the emphasis on safety. The Joint Rescue Coordination Centre, Royal Canadian Air Force, Canadian Coast Guard, Royal Canadian Navy, Marine Search and Rescue organizations from Victoria, Oak Bay, and Souk, and Transport Canada all take part, with the U.S. Coast Guard on standby as well.
One thing I'm very grateful for is the professionalism within the race committee. They are interested in having a safe race. And so I know that each year the racers are going to depart to Victoria under conditions that are conducive to a safe race. It'll be competitive, but it'll be safe. And I am more than happy to support efforts around Swiftsure like that. Swiftsure has an excellent tracking program. They use beacons that enable real-time tracking through the internet. I would encourage recreational boaters to also consider using beacons, not unlike the Swiftsure system, except these are 406 beacons, and they're connected to a satellite network that if you press SOS on that beacon, we're notified almost immediately.
In addition to serving over 400 racing competitors at the Royal Victoria Yacht Club, the Yacht Club manager Simon Gatrell is also a member of the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue Corps. He's been involved with Swiftsure safety.
Really proud of how strict and how thorough they are with the safety, from JRCC right the way down to the volunteers. It's huge and it's improved year after year as well. And I think they lead all the other races in the country on that.
The race started in 1930 and includes several courses, which all start off Clover Point at the Victoria waterfront. The race covers 3 bodies of water: the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Harrow Strait, and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. The longest race is the Swiftsure Lightship Classic at 138 nautical miles.
The next longest course is the Hind Bank race. The boats go to Nia Bay, continue on past east of Victoria around Hind Bank, and then finish in Victoria.
Most of the races are for mono-hulled boats. The next longest course is the Cape Flattery race.
And it goes from Victoria around Nia Bay and back to Victoria. In addition, multi-hull boats. There's a division of multi-hull boats. That's the boats that you see with more than one hull. Catamarans or trimarans. They also do the Cape Flattery race for multi-hulls.
4, 3, 2, 1.
We also have the Juan de Fuca race, and it's a shorter course, 79 nautical miles. It's generally for those who don't want to do a long overnight course.
There is also the daytime Swiftsure Inshore Classic, which begins at Clover Point and finishes in Camaraderie Bay, with an awards presentation to follow. There will be a new race added in 2018 within the Inshore Classic.
We're inviting classic boats that have raced perhaps 50 years ago, old wooden boats as well, to come and race and be part of the 75th running.
Among the competitors is Nick Banks, who has raced on several boats, mostly aboard Richard Ackrill's Dragonfly, the multi-hull that won line honors, first overall, first around the mark, and first in Division 1, all the first place trophies a multi can win. Here's the proud Dragonfly crew after completing the Cape Flattery race for multi-hulls. They finished at 1:57 on Sunday morning.
You can win once, but to do well consistently is a whole different platform. The importance of navigation, it's working with the tactician so that you are working the geography with the lay of the race course. So the owner of Dragonfly and I always work in tandem, doing tactics and navigation. And when we're going into the beach, for instance, he will go, how far can we go before we have to tack out depth-wise? And then we'll both look at it from a wind standpoint. But navigation is a very important component of any race. You look at the great sailors anywhere, they all make mistakes, but they all recover from them quickly. And that's part of Swiftsure.
In addition to being a race sponsor through UK Sales, Stuart Dahlgren is a 6-time Swiftsure competitor, 5 as skipper of his own boat, Westerly.
But it's just a cool boat. It's a neat piece of history. You know, you talk to sailors and they say boats are alive, right? And so they all have characters, and it's really easy to go fast, I guess, is what we like about it. You know, while you're always competitive and you're always watching, you know, the numbers and what's going on and what your competitors are doing, or trying to see what your competitors are doing sometimes, because visibility can be an issue. You know, there's definitely those moments where everything's just going right and it's just magic.
Why return to Swiftsure year after year?
They come back because of the challenge, I think. And I think you know, there's definitely a degree of notoriety, right? Swiftshure's a big one to win locally. It's an important one as far as everybody who races locally, you know, really respects it. And so I think I'm still just trying to get that win, I guess.
Mark Green has been volunteering at Swiftsure for 17 years and loves to sail the race with husband John.
I like to be part of it. Swiftsure is really exciting. We actually have won second and a couple of thirds, and one year we actually came in first. Woohoo! Wasn't that?
John Green has entered his 3-hulled boat into the very competitive multi-hull fleet.
My boat is called Sauterelle, and Sauterelle is a Farrier. It's called F9AX. F is Farrier, 9 is meters, A is amateur building, and extra is extra wide. I had a little wave of enthusiasm starting about 1994. I decided to build a boat. I wanted something that was fast and light and transportable. And after a lot of soul searching, we decided on a trimaran, and I knew nothing about trimarans at the time, except that Ian Ferrier, the designer, was a very good designer. I bought the plans and built a shed in my backyard in Cordova Bay, and it took us about 3 years and 3 months and 4 days and 6 hours and 15 minutes to actually finish building the boat. It wasn't really finished. We didn't do the inside. We had to get into the water.
There we go. Now we're starting the boat.
In 1996, we launched the boat, so this year the boat was 21 years old in the summer of 2017. Still looks brand new.
Alex Fox has sailed for over 50 years and participated in 26 Swiftsure races. Here is one of his earliest memories from childhood.
I remember one Christmas we built a mirror dinghy in our basement, and we actually had to cut away the cement stairwell to get the dinghy out of the basement to go sailing on Christmas morning.
What is the attraction?
You have to love the water, you have to love boats. You know, when you're on a boat with a crew, you're trying to make the very best of what you've got. So, as a friend of mine once said, you got to dance with what you brung.
Why race Swiftsure?
A big part of Swiftsure is the history of the race, and so you have people within just your normal everyday life that might not be involved in sailing, but they've heard about Swiftsure. It's not just a race, it's a social event. It's a coming together of sailors from Seattle, Anacortes, Bellingham, Vancouver, Victoria, and sometimes international competitors. So it's a race that people want to be part of, and it's a race that people want to compete in and do well.
Competition and a magnetic draw toward nature.
You can't depend on anybody else. You have to depend on yourself. You have to depend on your own ingenuity and your own skill set. If you don't have it, you better develop it at times.
Race chairman for 17 years, Bill Conconi saw Swiftssure's growth.
What we were involved in when we started was how to continue the evolution towards more of a community event as opposed to a yacht race. So being a part of the shift in focus was important to me. The regrouping of the committee, bringing in different talents that weren't involved before, working more closely with the media, working closely with sponsors, engaging, the community at a higher level, the Navy, the city, Bob Cross was mayor then, and he had a whole belief in the event as well and what it could do for the city.
It's that connection year after year after year that really, to me, was what I saw as being the great thing that happened during Swiftsure.
The work of master carver Sanford Williams is featured in sponsors' recognition.
I think the First Nations are engaging themselves in the event now, and Vern's been doing a lot of work with his committee and engaging the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nation and welcoming the event and blessing it, and that becomes a big important for us.
Swiftsure spans the generations.
My name is Mark Owenflood. I'm the skipper of the boat behind us called Discernment. This is my son, Matthew Owenflood. His great friend next door.
It's Lucas Galloway. I'm Steve Galloway. I'm his father. And I'm the least talented person on the crew.
We've been boating for years. We decided that we'd do a trip together. So we started preparing about 6 months ago. The fathers are actually the crew, and the boys are leading this trip for us on Swiftsure. We've been practicing for a bit. These guys have been working at the yacht club, learning how to sail, and we're learning how to crew.
For me, it's a wonderful thing to get out with my son. He's been sailing for years in small boats. I haven't had the opportunity to sail with him, so to be able to get out and spend the time with him and watch him grow as a sailor, as a man, I'm really going to enjoy it.
Volunteers are key to the success of the Swiftsure race. Here are some of the dedicated volunteers on the start vessel, alongside members of the Royal Canadian Navy. Volunteers have countless other roles, including at the docks working with racers, assisting tourists and locals at the Inner Harbour, in safety roles, and supporting the many activities at Clover Point. Charlotte Gann is an experienced sailor, having raced the Van Isle 360 7 times, the Oregon Offshore Race, Round the County, and Swiftsure. She speaks about the value of race sponsors.
They bring their ingenuity, they bring their own background, and we are always open to listening to that. So we have grown Swiftsure a great deal through the help and the insights of our supporting sponsors. We have had sponsors for decades in many cases.
The Greater Victoria Harbour Authority and the City of Victoria provide permits for the Swiftsure race at the Inner Harbour and Clover Point. Swiftsure trophies reflect the history and nautical imagery.
This is a model of the Swiftsure lightship that was anchored at Swiftsure Bank in the mouth of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. It was anchored there until 1960. It was the mark that the Swiftsure Lightship Classic boats rounded. Now the Royal Canadian Navy places a boat there, and this is one of the trophies that's given out to the winners of the Swiftsure Lightship race. This is the Kevin Clark Trophy, which is provided for first overall for the Swiftsure Inshore Classic. Kevin Clark, who's a member of the yacht club, donated it. What's interesting about this trophy is he bought it at an auction in England. Its origin was a cooling vessel for champagne glasses, and the champagne stems were put in here and with ice in it. But what's extra special is it's got images on the side of the trophy of sailboats. And you can see there, here's another one over here of sailboats all around it. So it has a marine background. It's very special for us.
Swiftsure is the largest yacht race on the North American West Coast in terms of the number of boats participating. It's always a challenge.
The Juan de Fuca Strait can be an extremely rough body of water. If you get wind against current and the typical westerly that fills in for Swiftsure, it can be, it can be a tough race. It can be a very challenging, tough race. On the other hand, there are times when the wind just doesn't show up for Swiftsure. so you just don't know what you're going to get. Teamwork is a big part of it. We're not professional, sailors. We're not being paid to do this. It's about getting on a boat with a bunch of other people, and it might be 5 people, it might be 10 people, it might be more. And it's about making the best of what you've got. It's about making it work with that group of people. And when you finally cross the finish line, and that can be very challenging in some Swiftsures, there's a sense of accomplishment for sure.
I think my favorite Swiftsure moments are almost always at night. It's almost always the trip back. It's the race out to whichever turning mark you're going to is always fun. But I think sailors always live for the downwind ride, and traditionally Swiftsure is a upwind to the turning mark and downwind to the finish. Especially the early evening, if you get a good moon and it's a beautiful night, and you're just cruising along towards home. That's a good feeling.
The most gorgeous part of the race is the camaraderie, the friendships you make. We have half of our competitors are from Seattle, others from Vancouver, others from Victoria, and you're out on the race course and you're competitive. You don't want to see them in front of you. You do whatever you can to beat them. But the day before the race and the day after the race, it's pure friendship. If there's somebody in trouble, whether with their boats in trouble or emotionally in trouble, you can just see the people helping out like a total team of friends working together. And it's that camaraderie, that friendship that has brought us back many, many times.
That's why I like to volunteer for Swiftsure, because racing is so important to me. I've done 11 Vic Maui races and returns, and this coming year will be my 12th. I've done many, many Swiftsures, raced the Oregon Offshore Race, which by the way is a feeder race to Swiftsure, so boats from Oregon race up to Victoria about 2 weeks before Swiftsure. I've done that many times, as well as raced on the East Coast, the Marblehead, and so on.
Swiftsure has been running since 1930. Its origins go even further back, though, to the late 1800s, when the Royal Canadian Navy and Hudson's Bay Company were competing against each other. But it is a part of the maritime heritage of Victoria. A lot of the events that happen around Swiftsure tend to inform other kinds of businesses that are interfacing onto the inner harbor. So the public, I think, care about that this is an island, this is a marine environment, and there aren't that many opportunities for the public to sort of face-to-face see what that could mean to them in a fun and interesting way. Swiftsure gives them that.
And I think that for everybody who lives in Victoria and has a sailboat, we are so blessed to have this wonderful race here right in our backyard. If you have a boat, scrape off the barnacles and get out, because you just have to do it.
And the Royal Victoria Yacht Club is a great starting off point. They're a great crew, great people. It's been a really positive experience. Enjoying every moment of it.